Welcome to another video on Introduction to Presentation Design. This video presentation will focus on training evaluations and how this evaluation feeds back into your training programs. So let's get started. Evaluations of training programs many times are often seen as a final step, but in actuality, it restarts the process of design and delivery. In a lot of ways, the evaluation of your previous program really begins the process for making improvements to the design and delivery for your next iteration of your presentation. Think of it like a cycle, a continuous cycle. Evaluation in your training program is really important because it provides the data to allow for continuous improvement of your program. And when you find out how participants have been impacted by your training, you then have an opportunity to assess how well the existing program works and to determine what modifications may need to be put in place to make it even more effective. Unfortunately for some, evaluation activities are often seen as an inconvenience because it takes time. It may also be viewed as an imposition, but it is essential. The trainer, teacher, and online facilitators must acknowledge our duty to measure results to help others, and without doing so, we will never know what things need to be changed in the program, what kind of assistance participants may need after they return to their jobs, or what obstacles still exist that prevent that transfer of training to our students. Let's talk a little bit about interim feedback, which consists of feedback in the middle of the program. This could occur the second module of a course or the second week of a course, whereby you might send out a questionnaire or a brief survey. You really don't want to wait until the end to find out something is wrong if you could fix it in midstream. So find an activity to obtain evaluation feedback on an ongoing basis, even if it's a forum you have set up. You can also do a Google form or a survey from SurveyMonkey. You just don't want to burden your participants down too much because they may get tired of doing it. At the least, you want to observe the behavior of your participants. This may be difficult in an online environment because you can't see the participants smile or if they seem alert, but you can actually see if they're involved and do they ask questions. You can tell if they are engaged. So you want to be doing that as you go through your courses with your students and try to elicit some feedback from them. Obtaining oral and written feedback from the students is critical to help to verify your impressions of the feedback obtained from your participants. There are two ways to obtain feedback: through observations and oral and written reports. Oral is real challenging, so you want to make sure that you have the time to put into it to get the information from your participants. Obtaining written feedback is usually quicker and less threatening. Like I mentioned previously, you can use a Google form or survey instrument. However, you may not be able to immediately clarify the information you receive if you want to probe further into the written comments. But in oral evaluations, you can do that. Make sure your evaluation tools are well designed. Some of the best techniques listed here would be the post-session survey, reaction surveys, anonymous remarks, oral survey, informal interview, and advisory group. Post-session reaction surveys create brief questionnaires and give them to the students at the appropriate moment at the end of the presentation that you give. In an online environment, you can send them a quick link they can go to and fill out a form, or you can hand it out for them to complete if it's a face to face course. An example of an anonymous remark is where you write a question on a blank chart or blackboard and allow students to respond to it. They can comment in a chat window. For example, you could ask them to use one word to describe their reaction to today's session, or why or what will they remember from today's lesson, or what was the most important thing they learned today, or something like that. In oral surveys, participants share their feedback on the program out loud or with a group. You can also ask for volunteers or go around in the group if you want to hear from everyone. Here's an example of an oral survey. What would you like to see less of? What would you like to see more of in the next session? You can also conduct informal interviews by eliciting feedback at breaks or through a virtual session you might have by asking what part of the presentation was helpful for you. Was anything unclear? Are you ready to move forward to the next material? How do you feel about it? And the fifth way to get oral and written feedback is through advisory groups. Meet with a small representative of your class that attended the presentation and obtain reactions. Maybe use a questionnaire similar to the questions we just talked about. In this next session, we will look at 4 stages of an evaluation of a training program. These levels were suggested by Kirkpatrick back in '94, which are reactions, learning, behavior, and results. We will now look at each step in more detail. As we go through each step, remember that each step is important and has value in its own right. It is a combination of evidences that truly determines how effective a training program is. The first step is reaction, how the participant reacts to the training. This level is the most common type of training evaluation. It's easy, fast, and inexpensive. When your program is ended, you will want to find out if the training met the participants' expectations. It allows you to get immediate feedback to try to obtain a picture of participants' reactions of the training program as a whole, as well as a sense of their response to the various parts of it. So reaction is the first level and probably the easiest one to get feedback from the participants. Level 2 is learning. It's an evaluation of the knowledge and skills the participants obtained from the training program, assessing what attitudes, knowledge, and skills they learned and what they still need to learn. Testing whether learning and change has occurred should involve pre and post test training measures. Be sure to go beyond testing just actual recall. So, see if participants can state the information in their own words or give examples of it in a variety of situations. Without this information, it's really impossible to determine whether or not training has met its stated objectives. And don't overlook the value of asking participants directly about what they've learned and how the information will be applied. The simplest approach is to use a questionnaire or interview and ask participants what skills or ideas do they now have that they did not have at the beginning of the program, or what have they learned that they can put into immediate use. You can also ask, what do you want to learn next? Those things can be real helpful. If possible, in addition to asking this information at the end of the training course, you can also follow up a few months later to get their response to these same questions to inquire about improvements. Ask them to share what they've implemented from the training they've received now that they are back on the job, that they're doing back on the job. Summarize these reports and mail the results back to the participants so that they can see that their feedback meant something to you, and you will incorporate that feedback into the next presentation. This also shows that you value their input. Level 3 is behavior. This is really how your students are applying the training, the learning, the education, the content. You could ask your participants a simple survey, a question like, how have you been using the things you learned in this course? Has this information been able to help you in your job? What specific steps can be taken to continue to improve the skills and knowledge that you've learned in the training and programs? You could also use the self reports of the participants. These may have some value, but there is no real way to confirm the changes that have been reported. So, post training performance should be evaluated by checking out the skills of the participants. For example, in a lot of our courses at the college, we actually have you using some of the technology that you are learning about as a platform for doing your presentations and your assignments and things like that. So you can actually measure if they have the skill or behavior. Behavior is a bit more involved than the previous levels, as you can see. So as you go down the steps, you see that the evaluation becomes more intense. However, this can be a very effective evaluating tool. Finally, level 4 is results. This determines what impact the training has had on the organization, on the class, on the students' involvement within the course. Assessing the results is probably the most difficult to do, but with portfolios, it can be very helpful in providing some feedback and being able to look at the data from there to examine whether your content is actually producing the results you've attempted with the outcomes you've laid out. A portfolio is a great mechanism, but also you can send out some surveys, look at retention rates in your program, in your courses, look at student awards, employee awards, as well, maybe even from the organization that they are a part of. You can look at publications and conference presentations, scholarly work that students are doing. Also, you want to look at evidence from all four of these different levels. It doesn't really prove that the training was responsible for all of the results, but if you carefully design it, it really can do that. You just want to be careful in how you set up your evaluation program so that you are not focusing too heavily in one area. You want to elicit feedback in all the different areas and bring back, um, that feedback back into the cycle of how you design the next iteration for your program or course. As we begin to wrap up and let's look at some final thoughts. The three areas to consider in evaluation design, which is focus, tools, and timing. In focus, you want to look at what areas you are evaluating. Your data can be gathered from any of the following ways: your participants' reactions, the knowledge, the skills, and attitudes of the participants, the on the job application, or in the course to determine whether they are applying the skills that they are learning and the results that we talked about on the previous slide. The second area in your evaluation design is tools. Tools refer to the means you are using in collecting the evaluation. So any of the following techniques can be utilized, such as a questionnaire, observations, tests, reports, interviews, competency-based opportunities for students to show what they learned, um, can be done through observations as well. You can do this in some of the assignments and activities you give to your participants and trainees also. Finally, timing has to do with when the data are collected, which can be a pre-training, during training, and post-training. We talked about the interim evaluation as the students are going through the training. Those are some good ways to do it. Pre-training is to determine where the students are at. During training can provide input as to how things are going. Are they getting through the course successfully? Are they being able to access things? Are they finding the things they need? And in post training, being able to measure and see the learning that has occurred as you compare the post training responses to the pre training responses. Finally, it's been said that evaluation of a presentation or training program is not only about the outcomes, but about the process. As you think through your presentation, your work that you are doing, it's not just about the outcomes, it's also about the process. You want to continue to evaluate each step of that journey that the students are taking as they are going through the process. Therefore, your evaluation efforts should address what's happening in the training program as much as whether it is making any difference. Why is the process of evaluation so important? Because without good records of what happened in your training program, it's not always clear what needs to be changed and if the outcome of the training is disappointing. So it allows you to know what are the strong points and things that need to be improved. To do this, try logging the events of the program in a journal or something like that, in a digital format that you can use for each course, what your reactions were as well, and how you would want to improve it in the next iteration of that presentation. You could also invite people from the outside, such as colleagues, to observe what you are doing and have them share some observations of what they experienced. That way, you will be able to develop some really good evaluative processes to go back and feed into that cycle of making your program even that much better. Well, we've reached the end of this presentation, and I hope you have gained some valuable insight about evaluation design in a training program and that it's a continuous, iterative process. It's never really finished in the sense that you complete a program, you evaluate it, and you're done. You need evaluation to help you improve the next iteration of your program, your presentation, and include all these different aspects that we've talked about: post session, pre testing, post testing, interim feedback, anonymous remarks, put up a whiteboard, chat room, or something like that that allows students to provide feedback, Google Form, SurveyMonkey, oral feedback, where you actually interview students to find out what they like and what they didn't like. We talked about advisory groups and the different levels of your evaluation, reaction, learning, behavioral results, and the measures that go into that. Remember, this is a continual process, and it really should be something that you use all the way through your training program and not just save for the end.